I am so excited to welcome our guest this week, Congresswoman Summer Lee of the 12th District of Pennsylvania. You've seen her on TV, you've seen the work she's done. We're going to talk everything from ICE to the Epstein Files to maybe even the 28 election. But let me just go ahead and introduce our esteemed guest, Congresswoman Summer Lee. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is my first time getting the chance to interview you. I've admired your work from afar for so long, so it's such a privilege to have a chance to converse. There's so much I want to talk about, but let's just kind of dive in. I want to start from last summer when you led a bipartisan effort for the full unredacted release of the Epstein Files. And I remember getting the notification and I was like, oh, this is great. I didn't expect this. This is what, can you talk about the behind the scenes stuff that was happening? Because I don't think people realize the ingenious move you pulled. Can you talk a little bit just about the story of how we got to that point where we were able to get that subpoena?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, let me just say this because, and this is no shade to any of the actions since, right? Or to the Epstein Transparency Act, which is
Yeah.
incredibly important, right? And a part of this journey for transparency, accountability for these survivors, for everybody who is essentially a victim to big,
Yeah.
corporations, big money, all these people who get away with stuff. But the subpoena that we got actually goes a step farther in the sense that, yeah, it's not supposed to be redacted, but for any survivors identifying information. And and we were able to do that because it's supposed to come directly to our committee where we can view sensitive materials in a way that's a little bit more discerning than other people. But back in July, right, it was when there was this big fever pitch from not the inside, right, from the outside, from people, especially Republicans, even independents, Democrats, who were all saying, screaming that they wanted these files to be released immediately. And it wasn't going away. And I think that, Trump and all of them, it was so clear to them that they wanted this to go away, so much so that they were going to send us home early.
Yeah.
So funny story, we actually got a new chair, our new ranking member in
Yeah.
the committee. And me and Robert Garcia, our teams worked together and we thought this was the best subcommittee that we could possibly do this in, right? It had all the people in a subcommittee that you would want to force something through, right? It was
Yeah.
people who had already, Republicans, right, who had already called for the Epstein files to be released. It was their base that was like leading the charge, calling for this. So we wanted to say, well, hey, this is a time to put your money where your mouth is. We couldn't get it through rules. We couldn't get the discharge petition done that became the Epstein Transparency. We couldn't get that done then. This was the first time that we were able to nail Republicans on any sort of bipartisan effort. In fact, I'd say in my time in Congress.
Yeah. And this is where I get frustrated with kind of some of the establishment members of the wing because this is what even you're in the minority and you still got the job done. Like you saw a goal and you figured out a path to get the job done. And we're seeing, then like Thomas Massie gets on board, which I did not see that coming, but that's great. Even Nancy
He's
Mace
around,
gets on board.
he's around.
Yeah, but I mean, he's it's a weird thing, but just to see that happen in real time was fascinating. Now we're approaching 2 months since the Epstein Transparency Act was signed into law, and we have seen a couple, like 5% of the actual full files. I don't know what the number is right
I
now.
think we're actually up to half.
We're now up to half now. Okay.
But they're saying that they will give nothing else for that bill.
And what we've seen in this half is just grotesque beyond words. I've worked as an attorney supporting survivors of domestic and sexual violence for nearly 2 decades. And what I'm reading in these files is worse than everything I've ever experienced in my nearly 20 years of practice. It's just mortifying. And that's with 38,000, according to the New York Times, mentions of Trump in this space. So what leverage do we have? Do we just have to wait until we flip the House at midterms? Like, what can we do in the meantime to get the full unredacted files as the law requires?
So the first thing that I'm going to say is that we should not let up right now. This excuse that they're using through the Epstein Transparency Act, right, which creates this loophole for any of the files that are, a part of an active investigation. I think the other bucket of files that they're withholding now is like interdepartmental determinations or something like that, right? None of those are exempted in our subpoena. So actually, the fight to have them comply with the lawful subpoena goes on, which is why I introduced the amendment, right, to hold Pam Bondi and the DOJ in contempt, right? They are actively in contempt of our subpoena. No ifs, ands, or buts, period, point blank. And I think that so many people, right, thought that, well, the Transparency Act kind of usurped that subpoena. It does not. So that's
No.
number one. I believe that they're in contempt and they should be held in contempt. We chose civil contempt because obviously we don't believe that the DOJ can prosecute the DOJ.
Right.
Right? But
That was
that's
my next
that's
question.
the problem, right? That's the challenge that we come up
Yeah.
against, right? The DOJ is the prosecuting body, and so much of what would come up for any sort of accountability mechanisms. So yeah, part of it is public pressure, and that public pressure. If we don't think that public pressure makes a difference now, the fact that half of these files are out, the fact that Pam Bondi released 38,000 documents with Donald Trump's name in it, no
Yeah.
matter how much gaslighting they tried to do, that they felt that they had to do that, it's because of the mounting public pressure. They thought, and why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Trump thought that anything that he wanted to disappear would disappear, right?
Yeah.
Remember years ago, he said that if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue, no one would say anything. Yo, he's
Yeah.
lived by that. So this is the first time that even his own base has kind of maybe accidentally even held him accountable. So that public pressure, got to keep it on. The survivors are still in this fight. And please know, we also have subpoenas to other institutions. So it's not just the DOJ. We have subpoenas out to Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan Chase, and a couple other banks. The Epstein estate is actually where we got a lot of this information.
Yeah.
We still have depositions that are coming up with like Ghislaine Maxwell, with one of the people who the survivors have told us is just crucial to this, Endike.
Yeah.
I believe he's supposed to come in. So there is still more to come. This is still an active investigation.
What possibility is there? Because obviously Pam Bondi can't arrest herself, right? I mean,
No, won't arrest herself.
yeah, right. I mean, this is not going to happen. But
A Democrat will probably arrest themselves.
yeah, I mean, you got me on that one. But what about some of these DOJ lawyers who are clearly obstructing justice? Can't we ask judges to hold them in contempt? And basically, the next lawyer that steps up knows full well, if I come into this role, I could very well undermine my entire career if I don't follow through on the way. Because we're going to talk about ICE in a second, and a Minnesota judge pointed out that ICE has ignored almost 96, maybe 100 court orders. I'm an attorney. If I deny a judge's order, I get held in contempt in court right away.
You beat
what
the
needs to
bar.
happen? What's that?
You beat this bar. There will be no more lawyering for you.
Right. I'd be done. I'd be disbarred in a heartbeat, and I have my name published publicly that I've been disbarred. Why isn't that happening? I mean, one of the confusions I have is why is that not happening in this situation?
Because, I mean, again, part of what we need to recognize right now, and I get it, there's a lot of smoke for the Democratic Party, very reasonably. There's a lot of smoke for all of our institutions. And I'm just sorry. There just is not enough acknowledgement of what Republicans have been handed and who they are, who we handed it to, right?
Yeah.
When has Donald Trump followed a law, right? When has he
Never.
cared about the needs, the norms, the mores, right? He's not.
No.
And we already know that everything he's been doing has been a stress test on the system. And that is true. And the problem right now is that in a normal time, we would have checks and balances. Those checks and balances would be the legislative and the judicial branch.
Right.
But we don't have those checks and balances right now. And there is not enough smoke for the Republicans of Congress, the House and the Senate, to have just abdicated their standing as a co-equal branch of government.
Right.
In fact, I had to ask, one of our people was like, listen, are you the chair of this committee or is Donald Trump the chair of this committee?
Right. Right.
Are we a co-equal branch of government or
Right.
or you whatever for Donald Trump? But people aren't thinking about that. So that's just number one, right? They're going to lie. They're going to cheat. And they told us they were going to do that. So right now, yeah, a lot of that is waiting and not just waiting and seeing. There's the other reason why we would like to go to civil right instead of the criminal route is because, again, civil will put us in the courts. And there
That's
actually have been victories for justice. There has been some justice or at least some accountability through the courts that we just have not been able to see elsewhere. So that is kind of part of that reasoning there. There has to be some, and they're not going to hold themselves accountable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is an important point I want to double down on, Congresswoman, that the progress made has been remarkable. It's not there yet. We're not where we want to be yet, but let's not discount the immense work that has been done. One thing I did not have on my bingo card was Bill Clinton coming out and saying, yeah, I'll testify. So what was your reaction to that? Where do you think the play is there?
I'm not trying to be funny, but I did. I did. Because first of all, at the end of the day, and this was a controversial thing. When we got that subpoena back in July, the whole reason why Republicans came back that day to vote, and they didn't have to, they thought that they would be able to slide other things in. So they amended, my motion. And part of that amendment was, these just outlandish kind of subpoenas to,
Yeah.
Eric Holder and the Clintons,
Yeah.
just whoever, because it was clear that they wanted a political. They wanted political
Yeah.
bull crap. We wanted
Yep.
justice and whatever. We had to get what we had to get. This is still a lawful subpoena. And at the end of the day, when we have the gavels, it's going to be subpoenas going out.
Yep. Yep.
And if Donald Trump thinks that he doesn't get to come in, or he doesn't have to come in, we will remind him of the precedent that he set here by
Right.
having his people, his minions, all in a former president.
That's right.
That means that precedent extends to him, and I have it on good authority that he actually ain't happy with that. So
Yeah.
part of the holdup was that Donald Trump, from what I understand, didn't want Bill Clinton to come in. Doesn't care about Hillary. She was not a president. Didn't
Right.
want Bill to come in. I knew though, but the witch hunt. You think whatever you want about the Clintons. You think whatever you want about Hillary. We all
Yeah.
have thoughts. But
Yep.
there's been a witch hunt, and we know that Republicans have been obsessed with them.
Yes.
DOJ is incredibly weaponized. This is Donald Trump's DOJ that goes hand in hand with Donald Trump's DHS that has, deputized ICE, Donald Trump's ICE, as largely Donald Trump Army
Yep.
in the authoritarian tradition. So I think that the prospect of them getting a fair one, was a problem. And at the end of the day, they should have come in. They should have
Yeah.
come in the 6 months leading up to this. They should have made that effort. And I'm happy, and I really am. I'm happy that they have made this effort now, that they are going to do this, because it's important that we send the message that our subpoenas do have weight,
Yes.
and that this investigation is serious. And that even if you don't know something, it's okay to say that. But that these survivors are craving some justice. They're craving just
Right.
any measure of acknowledgement that we need to get into the fight deeper.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to abandon them. And I don't want the Clintons to abandon them. And I don't want our party to abandon them. So, I thought they would come, because criminal contempt means jail.
That's right. That's right. And you'll see the remarks soon. I just saw it early this morning of Trump saying that, I actually like Bill Clinton. I don't like what they're doing to him. And I think it's to your point that he doesn't want to establish the precedent that a president can come in. Speaking of ICE now, and kind of shifting gears to that, and if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Congresswoman Summerlee of Pennsylvania's 12th District. There is some deeply concerning remarks coming out of Trump that make it a very plausible move by him to use ICE to intimidate the midterm elections, to seize ballot boxes. He's already done it in Georgia. How worried are you that Trump is going to do something like that? And what should we be doing? What should we be prepared for right now?
I'm worried about everything that Donald Trump says. I am not a person who, after years of experience with this man, who does not believe what he says, right? This is like the epitome. If someone shows you who they are, believe them.
First time, yeah.
Every time he does things, right? What he does is right, he walks out something. He trial runs.
Yep.
Some of his most absurd, some of his most law-bending thoughts, and then he tests them out. He sees what we're willing to put up with. And when I say we, I don't mean just Democratic Party. I mean we, the people of the United States, what we're willing to tolerate. How far over the line are we willing to allow him to go? Because we have to remember that every line he's crossed, right, it wasn't at force. He didn't break it down with force, right? He walked over it in some way. And every day he goes a little bit farther. It didn't start at, ICE doing, warrantless searches of people's homes. It didn't start with the gerrymandering efforts in Texas and other places. It didn't start with that, right? It started with things that were a little bit more tolerable. So I'm deeply worried about it. And not just that, I'm deeply worried about his use of ICE. I'm also deeply worried about the fact that, the Voting Rights Act is in the courts right now.
Yeah.
And there's every indication that it will not survive, which means that the gerrymandering efforts we're seeing today are going to be amplified by 2028. And that's perfect for them, because most of the districts that we're going to lose will be Black represented districts.
That's right.
And I'm sorry, not Black represented districts. Districts with Black people in them.
Black majority, yeah.
Black majority districts. And those people are going to lose representation. And it is going to set us back, because the reality is I don't care what you think about identity politics. Everybody in this country deserves the right to be represented in our representative democracy.
Yep.
Right? That is the basic tenet of it. And without the Voting Rights Act, there's nothing in our history that tells us that these people in these districts will be protected anymore. All history tells us that they won't be. So when you add these up, these are just quintessential attacks on democracy itself. But again, I've heard this said that if a democracy is failing, you have like 2 years before it bottoms out. And I think that we, because of American exceptionalism, believe that it just won't happen to us.
No.
And we're still looking for the institution to catch itself. When in reality, the final net, the final safety net is the people. It is our organized labor, our organized money. It is us taking a stand. It's us putting down red lines that we enforce. And of course, it is the Democratic Party being firmer in it than the people. But
There's a tweet that was going viral a couple days ago that said that when historians study this period of American history, they're not going to be shocked by the greed of the wealthy, but by the acquiescence of the poor, of just kind of allowing it to happen. And we see, the Southern strategy on full display here of racist MAGAs saying, well, at least I'm not black or brown or an immigrant, so therefore I'm going to be protected, when you're not going to be protected either. And I think this is one of the frustrations that, you talked about the norms that Trump continues to trample over. I want to stay on ice for just one more second about this, because it was these norms that Merrick Garland adhered to, even in his parting message, that have, in my view, destroyed our Republican democracy, because we don't have a rule book anymore. Anything goes. And rather than recognize that we need to hold accountable, Jack Smith just testified that he can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump tried to violently overthrow the government. And here's Merrick Garland pontificating about norms. One example is with ICE, and this is where I really struggle with the Democratic Party. A 2019 report by The Guardian, you may have seen it, documents about 5,000 cases of ICE and DHS sexually abusing migrant children. 5,000 cases. When the Biden administration came in, they did almost nothing to hold accountable any of those perpetrators. They only increased ICE funding over and over and over again, and now Trump is just continuing that round. What needs to happen, and is it still possible to pass legislation or to launch an investigation to pursue those abusers? Because for all we know, Guardian came out with another report of ICE torturing men, crushing their testicles. There's a horrific report out of Alabama of an ICE agent raping a woman repeatedly to allow her to see her daughter. I mean, the list is just ongoing. What needs to happen now for there to be meaningful investigations into these abuses to stop them from happening?
well, first I would say that Democrats have to stop running cover for ICE.
Thank you.
Democrats have to stop running cover for ICE. This
Yes.
isn't about, basic reforms. We can't change things that we don't accept. We can't change things that we don't acknowledge. And if we are insistent on saying that, oh, the only issue with ICE is that they don't need masks or they need to be whirled in, and not that foundationally, this has been an institution that has terrorized neighborhoods,
Yes.
terrorized throughout our country, right? That the abuses that they've been able to get away with have been with a blank check next to it and supporting it, right? So no, and it's not just not running cover for ICE and for these institutions. That is, I think, for me, the fundamental issue that I have with the big D Democratic Party. And friends, it doesn't mean that I have an issue with every Democrat. It doesn't mean any more than I have an issue with every
Cosign.
whatever, right? But
Cosign.
big
Yep.
D Democratic Party is that too often our instinct, their instinct, because I ain't grouping me with that, their instinct is to protect the institution. And for them, the institution is incumbency, the institution are these norms, right? The institution are the traditions that come with it. And a part of those traditions were civility, and camaraderie with the other side. And I think that has made them uniquely incapable of understanding these times, of
Yes.
adapting to these times, and to meeting this particular moment. And that extends to ICE, that extends to the authoritarianism that's growing. There is always a democratic excuse behind it, right? When it comes to appropriations, when it comes to how we navigate, and even when it comes to our messaging. So I'm hearing too much when we say ICE should be abolished for these very particular reasons. People who would instead say, well, listen, we should disavow slogans, right? We should do this. ICE is already not following the law.
Thank
So
you.
making a law that says they cannot wear a mask is not going to make them more prone
Yes.
to not wearing masks. They are already violating laws, violating norms. We need to reimagine what our immigration policy looks like from the ground up. We need
Yes.
to imagine how we are interfacing with people, so many people who are coming here desperate, who are coming here because of policies that we created, who are coming here for the same better life that other people, Americans who were once not American, came for. We have to acknowledge the inherent racism and classism behind how we treat different peoples. We have to do that work in policy We have to do it in messaging. We have to do it in our actions. And that for me does not mean negotiating more, negotiating, ID, law enforcement holding
Yeah.
IDs.
Yeah. I completely agree. I looked at the negotiation protocols or whatever you want to call it that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries want, and the number one thing is we need a guarantee that that ICE is going to follow judicial warrants. I'm like, that's already the law. Why are you negotiating something that's already the law? Why are you trying to pass that as a law again? It makes no sense to me whatsoever, and that's kind of my fear. And this is one of the biggest criticisms of the big T Democratic Party, that is controlled opposition. It's just happens to be coincidence that when 8 Republicans defect in the last bill and vote with Democrats, 7 Democrats defect and vote with Republicans, and the bill passes by 1 vote. It just so happens that when 21 Republicans defect in this appropriations bill last week or earlier this week, 21 Democrats also defect and vote Republican, and it just passes by a couple of votes. I mean, it's frustrating to see this controlled opposition every single time, and the lack of a unified bloc in stopping the Trump agenda is extraordinarily frustrating, which brings me to the last thing I want to talk to you about before we wrap up here. AIPAC has come after you aggressively, and they continue to come after you. Corporate PACs come after you aggressively, yet you do something that people claim is impossible. You remain uncompromising on your values. You remain uncompromising on your principles. You don't throw any minority community under the bus, whether it's Muslims or immigrants or trans people or any marginalized community. You stand by your values, 10 toes down, and you win elections by being who you are. Why are you not the standard in Congress? How do we duplicate you and show people, hey, this is not hypothetical? You can lead with your values courageously and unapologetically. How do we duplicate you in Congress is my question. That's actually just my question right there.
That's a really, okay. I don't think that everybody will like this answer. And first of all, let me say, just to the other points, at the end of the day, yeah, we do things wrong, and we have to stop doing things wrong because
Yes.
we do need to win. Because we do need to take power away from Republicans who are totalitarian in their worldview, right? They have very explicit about what they want. To that end, how do we get more people who are able to stand? And that is the point. It is able. Listen, I don't act like I'm somebody special or unique. There were so many people who ran, when I ran, who have run before and since, who should have been in Congress, like, by their stances, their ideology, by the works that they've done. And yeah, that money's hard to defeat. That money's hard to defeat. So I will say the first thing that we have to do is we have to look within before we look to other people to accepting us. We have to do introspection about how we support candidates. We can't be half in, half out, right? Do we want a United States government that reflects the people of the United States? Or do we say that, electoralism can't win? Because our investments make the difference there. The reason why I was able to overcome AIPAC, and we did not overcome them in spending, we were able to keep up, right? We didn't get lapped, right? It's because people helped me. Because we had people in district and around the country who saw value in our movement. People were making phone calls for us to counteract the lies that AIPAC were telling in real time. People were donating to make sure that we can go up against their IE in real time. We only had a week and a half to get it right, and they did it, and we did it. That made the difference. At the end of the day, we went from 25 points up to a dead heat. At the end of the day, we needed every ounce of support we could get. Every candidate doesn't get that, and every candidate can't get that right now. Our movement can't necessarily match the dark money that exists. We can't. It doesn't matter how many good guys who believe in a fair representative democracy when, AIPAC is $98 million right now.
Crazy.
Cash on hand, right? And it's not just AIPAC. Crypto has millions and millions of dollars. Pharma can maintain, big oil and gas. All these institutions, these corporations, these interests, they all have money that my bus driver and my nurse and your union worker, your teacher, they can't keep up with that, and they shouldn't have to keep up with that. So that's why for me, we have to put our money literally where our mouth is. That's why I'm so hyper focused on getting money out of politics. We have to level the playing field, right? Working class people cannot compete in a system where all it takes is one special interest group to say, hey, that district right there, oh man, we can get big bang for our buck there. And that's why they pick on people in these types of districts. It's not a coincidence what type of districts AIPAC goes to. They go to Black and brown districts. They go to these urban centers where, you can call your Rolodex and you'll never find $10 million.
It's no way.
They knew
No, there's
that.
no way. And I mean, that's what happened to Congressman Cori Bush, and I'm hoping she gets back
Absolutely.
in. My question, you answered the question, but I want to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, let's go deeper. I'm sorry because sometimes
What?
I get sidetracked. That's on me.
No, no, no. You answered the question beautifully, and I think people need to hear that it requires coalition building, it requires organization. It doesn't just happen magically. It requires hard work.
Hard
The
work.
door knocks. I mean, I remember knocking doors till my knuckles were calloused, right? I mean, I get all that. My question is a little bit deeper. What makes you tick? What makes you say, I'm not going to back down? I'm not going to decide to throw somebody under the bus because it'll allow me to get a couple of extra bucks or a couple of extra, like, what makes you
I love
decide
it.
that this is how I got elected, this is who I am, and I'm not going to change that because some consultant in DC or some dark money pack said that they'll go easy on me if I change this value? Like, what makes you tick, and how do we make that the norm in the Democratic Party of making them be fighters instead of folders?
Yeah, genuinely. I don't know if I have a profound answer because I don't think it's profound. I think the thing that makes me stay on that straight path, to the extent that I can, I'm human, guys. We're all human. It's really that I'm convicted, right? That is my North Star is justice, right? I
Love
came
that.
into elected office because I wanted peace and justice and liberation for my people, right? That is it. And I know that sounds like cliche, basic, but it actually is. It is the thing that has throughout my entire life been my driving force. When I was a kid, and like they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a civil rights activist, right? What does that even? What is that job, right? That's not a real job. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that is a real job, but I
What you
didn't know
mean?
what
Yeah.
it was as a job.
Yeah.
Like I've just always had this itch for justice and for trying to help bring it about. So my answer to that is like, what do we need? We need to support better people, right? There are many things that would drive somebody to want to go to Congress. And listen, let's just be real. Some of it is clicks. Some of it is that people want to be influencers. They want to be influential. They want to be, on TV. There's nothing wrong with that, friends. I'm not saying there is. I'm saying, though, that to survive in this place with your soul intact, you have to have a North Star that is not so superficial, because these days get hard, because there are so many temptations, because it is so much easier to be accepted, to be loved. And guys, it's not that I don't face acceptance. I got friends in Congress. They treat me fine. They treat me
Yeah.
well. But it is uncomfortable. I remember after October 7th when we said, hey, we can hold both things, that we don't want innocent people to be murdered, no matter what their faith background is, no matter what their nationality is, and that we were afraid that the response would lead to precisely what has led to this
Yeah.
genocide.
Yeah.
And in those early days when we were trying to balance, how do we talk about this in a way that does not erase Palestinians, that does not diminish what Gaza has already experienced, does not erase the history. And it was only us, it was only a few of us who were losing sleep. It was only a few of us who really felt that pressure to not contribute to the dehumanization of people who have already been dehumanized. And it's not just that, right? It's so many things, right? It's so easy to say, well, listen, at the end of the day, I have to survive. There are members of Congress, members of state houses, members of city councils who convince themselves that, listen, I can't do good for you if I'm not here. So the calculus changes,
Right.
right? The PEMDAS formula
Yep.
changes, right? It goes,
Yep.
right? It
Yep.
goes from, your first job is to, represent the people, to my first job is to make sure that I can come back. And that can be, and it starts very well meaning, but it spirals. And so to change that is that we need to make sure that we're selecting people who are true, people who are honest. Like that feels very basic. It
That-
feels very basic to say that, but that is a foundation to build on. Everything else is shaky ground.
If that's not a profound answer, I've never heard a profound answer. That was an excellent answer. Last question, Congressman, before you go. Who is your pick for VP when you announce for 2028 presidency?
Why would anybody want to be president? Why would anybody want that? I don't know. What are you up to?
I,
You're making me go to a terrible
I,
place.
I'm an immigrant, so unfortunately I can't run. But
Wow.
maybe we'll do it and make them sue us. We'll see.
They will
Congressman,
sue us so fast.
they will so fast. Yes, thank you so much for your courage, for continuing to speak truth to power. We'll be sure to include all the links and make sure folks support you. What's your plan for this midterm before you go? What's the game plan to make sure we continue to win and take back the House?
Yeah, first of all, the game plan is representing the actual interests, the actual urgency that people are asking us to come with, right? This is not a guarantee, folks. We don't just win the midterms because of some like scientific swing, pendulum swing, right? That must come back to the blue side. No, 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 no. We win by putting in that work. We win by not taking a single person for granted. So for me, it is continuing to do that outreach to people who have been left on the margins, working class people who are being crushed by whether it's everything from Republican tariffs to, Democratic apathy when it comes to policies that actually are transformative. It's prioritizing those policies, Medicare for all. We're talking about the ACA right now.
Yeah.
Re-up that art. We need to re-up that effort. We're talking about housing justice right now. Even Donald Trump is talking about it.
Yeah.
I know people in Pittsburgh want affordable housing. They want to own housing in their neighborhoods. It's money in politics. It is taking on ICE. It's calling out the authoritarianism. It's being on the streets with our people. It's showing them that we might not feel like we individually have all the answers, but I know that the answers are contained within our collective. So I will rededicate myself. I hope that every Democrat who is elected rededicates themselves with our collective movement in a way that really honors the tradition of organizing, of activism that actually changes the trajectory of the country of authoritarianism. That's what I think we should be doing between today and not just this November, but today and all of the Novembers.
From your mouth to God's ears, thank you, Congresswoman Summerlee, for the amazing leadership that you continue to show. You always have a spot on this platform.
Thank you, brother. It was good to see you. Good to be with you today.